death of Her Majesty and the accession to the crown of now King Charles III, there has been some discussion, clearly not the main subject of discussion in relation to the death of the Queen and the accession of the King, but there has been some discussion around taxation and how are the royal family taxed. Now, what I'm going to cover here has been covered in a lot more detail in our Techlink bulletin on the subject. So this is really just a summary, and there's nothing new here. This has been with us for some time now, and the basis of taxation of the sovereign, effectively, was set out in a memorandum on the 5th of February 1993, together with supplements on the 23rd of July 1996, the 20th of April 2009. Then a new memorandum, which updated the past documents, was agreed and implemented from the 6th of April 2013. And this is broadly what it says. Look, all members of the royal family are taxed pretty much like anybody else. Special rules apply to the sovereign and the Prince of Wales. So basically, the sovereign, this is an interesting point, though, is not legally liable to pay income tax, capital gains tax, or inheritance tax. Why is that? Well, because the relevant enactments don't apply to the Crown. The Prince of Wales is not legally liable to pay income tax on the income from the Duchy of Cornwall, to which the Crown exemption also applies. Right, so what has happened? Well, the Queen has paid income tax and capital gains tax on a voluntary basis for some years now, back to those dates of the memorandum. And Prince of Wales also pays voluntary tax on his income from the Duchy of Cornwall to the extent that it's not used to meet official expenditure. Tax is paid on all private sources of income, such as investment income and trading profits, even by the sovereign and the Prince of Wales. So when we look at capital gains tax, how about that? Capital gains tax has also been paid from the 6th of April 1993 on any gains from the disposal of private assets on or after that date. So this is all done voluntarily. And then the subject, which has been raised most recently and most regularly, given that it's most connected with death, is inheritance tax. So what is the position there? Well, basically, the special position applies to the sovereign, effectively, and it's in relation to private assets, assets that can be properly regarded as private assets. The arrangements provide that the inheritance tax will not be paid on gifts or bequests from one sovereign to the next, but will be payable on gifts and bequests to anybody else. So anyone else who gets something from the Queen on death or from the King on his death will pay inheritance tax in the normal way. The exemption only applies on transfers from the sovereign to the next sovereign, effectively. The Prince of Wales, the Queen agreed to this back in 1993, and then renewed that in 2013. And the Prince of Wales intends that from his accession, which is with us now, of course, to the throne, he will pay income tax and capital gains tax on the same basis as the Queen. And he's also in agreement with the arrangements in relation to inheritance tax. So what I've just described will continue to be the case for King Charles III. But basically what we see is no inheritance tax on private assets passing from one sovereign down to the next. Any assets that are not private, held essentially for the benefit of the Crown and the state generally, even though essentially they're sort of owned by the Queen or the sovereign, but held on in a kind of trust arrangement in effect, like the Crown estate, for the benefit of the whole country, is excluded from inheritance tax because they can't actually be given on formally to other people anyway. So it's basically in relation to private assets, no inheritance tax on assets passing down from one sovereign to the next. For the detail on this, if you have been a little confused by my somewhat garbled explanation there, have a look at the Techlink bulletin on this subject.